Hello, welcome to another episode of In the Trenches with Gang Green. I'm your host, Bubbs. Today is Friday, July 12th. Hopefully everybody is having a good day so far today. We are another day closer to the start of training camp, another day closer to the regular season. Exciting times if you're a football fan. Tickets for Jets training camp go on sale, I believe, next week. So next week's it. After next week, training camp will begin the week after. So really, next week is the final dead week of the offseason of the NFL calendar year before we get training camp the week after and preseason games after that. And of course, in a little over a month from now, I think 9. I think this week is 8 Sundays away from week number 1. So exciting times to be an NFL fan, exciting times to be a Jet fan. We got another episode for you today on the podcast. This is episode 324. Appreciate you guys for joining me. Thank you all for joining me. As always, for those of you watching on YouTube, make sure to please like and subscribe, setting that goal of 1,000 subscribers by week 1 of the NFL season. Jets, Niners back on Monday Night Football. Today, I want to get into a couple different things, break down a couple different things, a couple things that came out in the news, along with my 3 breakout candidates for the New York Jets on offense. So I wrote an article on this yesterday. It is up. I'll link the article in the description down below if any of you want to go and see that, get my thoughts as well in article form. But today I want to break down 3 New York Jets breakout candidates on offense. And then probably sometime next week, I will do another episode on this, breaking down 3 breakout candidates for the New York Jets on defense. So we'll start with that today on the podcast. Then I want to get into an update for me and Rappaport today on Justin Simmons. Will the New York Jets sign him? When will he sign? We got an update on that today. If it's something realistic for the New York Jets, we'll break that down. And then also CBS Sports Network did their NFL head coaching rankings, and Robert Saleh came in very, very low on the list. We'll break that down and really kind of break down why, again, Robert Saleh being low on that list is another reminder of this is Aaron Rodgers' team. It is up to Aaron Rodgers, especially some comments that were made the other day by Mike Williams regarding the offense and who the real play caller is, and that is Aaron Rodgers, and why everything this season hinges on the future Hall of Famer at quarterback. Before we begin, I want to tell you about our podcast partner, Huga House. Head on down to the link in the description down below. Click that link. That'll take you to the Huga House store, where you'll be able to shop from a wide range of hats. Those hats have been seen on Aaron Rodgers, who rocks the Huga House hat all the time, as you can see for the YouTube audience here in the pictures up on the screen. Even Shane Gillis, Shohei Ohtani, JT Realmuto, division rival Josh Allen, Tyler Conklin. All of these guys rock the Huga House apparel. You've seen me on the show a lot wear my Huga House swag as well. So head on over to the Huga House store. Click the link in the description down below. Use promo code BUBS for 15% off your purchase. They've just released 10 brand new hats. So if you want to get yourself some swag, help support the podcast, use promo code BUBS for 15% off and get yourself some of the swag that QB1 Aaron Rodgers rocks all the time. Now let's get into today's podcast. I wrote an article on this yesterday, or it got released yesterday, I should say. And I broke down the 3 New York Jets offensive breakout candidates. So like I usually do, I want to also make an episode on this, expanding on what I put on, what I put onto paper as well in an article form. I want to break it down as well on an actual podcast here. Now, we know the New York Jets are obviously loaded on offense. You know, you look at this team, you have Breece Hall, you have Garrett Wilson, 2 rising stars, 2 guys that are absolute studs at their position. Breece Hall ranked number 2 at his position. Garrett Wilson, a good chance by the end of this season, will be arguably top 7, top 5 if he goes off for 1,400, 1,300, 1,500 yards around there. There's a good chance he's up there in the elite category after this season. You added Mike Williams. You have Tyler Conklin. You made all sorts of move on the offensive line. This team's loaded with a lot of talent, especially some big name talent, and it's a good mix. You got some of the younger talent in Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson, who are not really young anymore. They're entering year 3. They're going to be looking for contracts soon. but they're young compared to, they're not veterans either. They haven't been in the league for 10 seasons as well. They are still rising, blossoming stars in the grand scheme of things from an NFL perspective, from an actual roster perspective. So you've got that balance of some young talent. You also drafted Braylon Allen. You also drafted Malachi Corley. And then you've also got your veteran talent, of course, headlined by Aaron Rodgers, Tyler Conklin, a veteran, Mike Williams, who you brought in, a veteran. Even on the offensive line, you've got Tyron Smith, a veteran. You added Morgan Moses, a veteran. John Simpson, who not quite as long in the league as Tyron Smith and Morgan Moses, but still a guy with a lot of playing time under his belt, a veteran. And then you've got your two younger guys in AVT, Joe Tippmann, although I can't even consider AVT young anymore. I mean, he's been in the league since 2021. Unfortunately, he suffered injury, so it feels like he hasn't been in the league that long because he hasn't played a ton. Hopefully, he's on the field a lot more this year. So the point being is, when you just take a kind of a step back and look at this roster as a whole, it's a really balanced offense with a good core of a young nucleus, your Breece Halls, your Garrett Wilsons, and then also, and even in AVT, even those guys, and then obviously a veteran nucleus in your Mike Williams, your Tyler Conklin. Those are the headliners. Of course, Aaron Rodgers, we know, the veteran, the guy on this offense. We don't need to talk about that. We all know what Aaron Rodgers brings to the table. So I wanted to break down some of the under-the-radar guys because, everybody's talking about Garrett Wilson. Everybody's talking about Breece Hall, but there is still some of these depth pieces, not so much depth pieces when one of the guys is a starter, one of the guys is a cornerstone up front for this team, which we'll get to there in a little bit. But especially starting with some of the receiving corps, some of the pass catchers on this team, some fans start to wonder, outside of Garrett Wilson, outside of Mike Williams, outside of Tyler Conklin, who are going to be your threats in the passing game. Is it going to be Malachi Corley? Is it going to be Allen Lazard, who maybe has a better season? Is it going to be Jason Brownlee? Is it going to be Xavier Gibson? Is it going to be Jeremy Rucker, Kenny Yeboah, one of those other guys? Because the New York Jets could use a little bit of help there. So that's where I'll start. My first breakout candidate, and these are also guys too, not even just breakout candidates. These are also guys that need to have productive seasons for their own future and for the New York Jets this year in order for them to have success. And that's where I'll start. I'll start with a receiver, and that's Xavier Gibson. Breakout candidate number one. Last year, Xavier Gibson was one of the cool stories in the NFL, right? He goes out, undrafted free agent. The Hard Knocks had the special on him of him and Jason Brownlee learning that they made the team. Them two were training camp darlings. They were talked about all the time. Good punt returner, good kick returner, did a lot of good things in preseason games, did a lot of good things in the training camp practices, made the team. Then in week number one, when Aaron Rodgers goes down, all hope seems lost. He turns the night into a memorable one with the punt return in overtime to beat the Bills. And then things kind of similar to the Jets season, things kind of slowed down for Xavier Gibson. And last year, for an undrafted free agent rookie that was supposed to be on a team with a Hall of Fame rec quarterback, was supposed to be on a team that was supposed to have success and go to the playoffs, was instead, as a rookie, handed the worst quarterback play in the NFL, an offensive coordinator that had no clue what he was doing. You can kind of understand, and a guy that was an undrafted free agent, so still had a lot of work to do to begin with to make it in the NFL. You can kind of understand why at times he wasn't really much of a factor. He wasn't much of a contributor. I would have liked to seen them get Xavier Gibson involved a lot more last year, just so we kind of got a better idea of what he was. You look at his box scores last season, you go back and remember some of the games that he played. I mean, the best game he had was that Falcons game where he looked good. He had, the five receptions for 77 yards. He also had the rushing touchdown against the Texans in the crazy Zach Wilson game. So you saw some good things where Xavier Gibson was kind of used in some of those jet sweeps, was used underneath, used his speed a little bit. But in total, he had a little bit of a bumpy year afterwards from week one in a punt returning, kick returning standpoint. If you remember that Bills game when they went up to Buffalo late in the season, the game Zach got benched, the Jets started that game by Xavier Gibson muffing the kick. and Bills recovered, ended up going down. And I believe they scored, or they made a kick to field goal. I forget, but he muffed the kick early on before the Jets could even go out there. They already gave the ball back to the Bills. So he struggled a little bit in the return game. Total, though, he ended the season with 830 total return yards from a kickoff and a punt returning standpoint. He finished his rookie campaign with 21 receptions for 229 yards, no touchdowns. Used a little bit from a rushing perspective, 8 carries, 68 yards, had the 1 touchdown against the Texans. So it was interesting. I think his rookie year was kind of summed up as you don't really know. He's an undrafted free agent. He had the worst quarterback playing football. He had a terrible offensive coordinator. A lot was going against him for an undrafted free agent to prove himself in the NFL. It's tough enough for Garrett Wilson to be productive last year, let alone a rookie in his first year coming out of Stephen F. Austin, not a big name school, not a big name program. Also a guy that, of course, a little undersized. Jets were still trying to figure out how to use him, how to get him involved. You had the whole McCole Harmon situation where, he was off the team. He barely played, opened up an avenue for Gibson. But entering year 2, I have higher expectations for Gibson this year. And I think Gibson's going to have a little bit of pressure on him to perform this season, because I don't think you can guarantee Malachi Corley right away is going to play a lot. And we'll see what he does in training camp, but he's a rookie. The Jets might ease Malachi Corley into things a little bit early in the season, and that's going to open up a door for Xavier Gibson when the New York Jets take on the 49ers in week 1 to be out there for the first snap of the season, to be out there as a starter coming in the slot. And we know what Aaron Rodgers does with slot receivers. He always likes those guys underneath. From the days of Jordy Nelson to when he had Randall Cobb, he likes those underneath speed guys that can do some damage both through the pass receiving game, but also those gadget guys as well. One of the reasons the New York Jets brought in a Malachi Corley. But to start, it's going to be up to Xavier Gibson. And I think with a better quarterback, better offensive line, year 2, you expect to see some growth. Last year was about the worst possible scenario for a rookie receiver was the New York Jets. Everything that offense had go wrong, went wrong. And to be a rookie on that offense was awful. Year 2, Aaron Rodgers. Rodgers has talked highly of Xavier Gibson. We'll go ahead and breakout candidate number 1. And again, he's got some pressure on him, because if Corley's not ready right out of the gate to start and produce at a high level, not saying he's going to redshirt, but they're going to probably ease him into things. Unless if he flies out of the gate in camp and looks great in the preseason and does all these great things, but he's probably going to get eased into things earlier in the year. If Mike Williams isn't 100% right out of the gate and Malachi Corley's learning still, Gibson's going to kind of be relied upon as that number 2 alongside Garrett Wilson. So he's got some pressure. Breakout candidate number 1 will go Xavier Gibson. Better in the punt return, kick return game. I thought he was solid last year. He had some of the rookie growing pains. Look, nobody's going to be perfect. He had some of the muffs, but showed some progress, showed some good things when he got the ball. Only 21 receptions, 229 yards, small sample size, but there was a lot of things that went wrong around him. Moving on now. This guy has, I think, a lot of pressure on him. Maybe one of the most pressured guys from a perspective of being a number 2. Like, he's not a starter. Unlike Gibson, who might be a starter. There's always pressure that comes when you're a starter, but to be a backup, there's usually not much pressure. But for this guy, there's a good amount of pressure, and that's Jeremy Ruckert, right? Cool story. From Long Island, grew up a Jet fan, drafted in 2022, 3rd-round pick, 101st overall, gets the call of his life, playing for his hometown team. But a little bit now, and this might be putting it harsh, but it's kind of put up or shut up now for Jeremy Ruckert. Because in his first 2 seasons, there was legitimate reasons and excuses for his not much production from a production for his reasons for little production, right? Year number 1 was redshirt year. He played in 9 games. He caught the ball once. He was targeted twice, right? With Tyler Conklin and CJ Uzomah ahead of him, he was buried on the depth chart. He was learning, a 3rd-round pick, barely played, redshirt year. Okay, understand. Last year, bad quarterback play, still was buried on the depth chart with Uzomah and Conklin. Should have played a lot more, but Hackett's terrible. The offense was terrible. for some reason, they kept rolling Uzama out there, even though he was mugging people on the field with all the penalties he was taking. But either way, I digress. We don't need to rehash last year. So he kind of got a pass for that as well. But now entering year 3, he's the legitimate number 2 tight end behind Tyler Conklin. And Conklin's a free agent at the end of this year. I don't know if he'll resign. We'll see. I think a lot of it will depend on what happens this year with Ruckert. If Ruckert plays well, maybe the Jets let Conklin walk. If Ruckert doesn't do a whole lot, do they bring him back? Who knows? That's 2025 conversations. I'm not even going to go down that road right now. Conklin's been great. He should have an excellent year this year. He finally has a quarterback. He's been awesome these last 2 seasons, despite all the things going on around him. But now for Ruckert, he's got to prove himself because there's no more excuses. Not a red shirt. Doesn't have bad quarterback play. He's going to have Aaron Rodgers. He's not buried on the depth chart. He's the legitimate number 2. He's got to prove that too. Like, you can't have Kenny Yeboah jump you on the depth chart this year. Because through the spring, through the offseason workouts, Yeboah was pretty productive and seems like he might be a better pass catcher than Ruckert. And Ruckert's more of the run blocking type of tight end. But in 24 career games played, he has 17 receptions on 24 targets and 159 yards. He's yet to reach the end zone. Last year, he had 16 receptions for 151 yards. We know what he can do as a run blocker. He has to break out as a pass blocker, or a receiver, rather. He has to. He has to. And he's going to have to break out. And I believe he can. Look, this was a guy that was immensely talented coming out of Ohio State. Was one of the better tight ends in that draft. Was a 3rd-round pick. You invested a 3rd-round pick into a tight end, a day 2 pick, day 2 selection. It's year 3. He's going to be 24 years old. He's going to have way more snaps. He's got a Hall of Fame quarterback. Everything is now in front of Jeremy Ruckert to produce at a high level, to produce at a level where you can go into next year feeling good about this guy maybe being your future at the position. Because if not, if he doesn't play well this year, then all of a sudden you're kind of left with some questions next season. So very important for him. And look, if he doesn't play well this year, who knows what his future looks like? If he plays all 17 games and he's just not playing well and Kenny Yeboah looks better, you wonder what Ruckert's future is then as a Jet. Like, he has to prove it now. There's no more excuses. You have Aaron Rodgers. You're not buried anymore. You're going to have chances. You're going to get the snaps. Run blocking, great. Turn into a better pass catcher. Get involved more. It's on him now. And I like Jeremy Ruckert. I really do. We all want to see him succeed. It's an awesome story. Time is now. So breakout candidate number 2, Jeremy Ruckert. Number 3. And I don't even know if you want to consider this like a huge breakout because he showed a lot of good things last year, but that's Joe Tippmann. And I would say he's probably going to be the best of these 3 guys this season. I mean, this is a legitimate blue chip cornerstone piece on the offensive line that the New York Jets made significant progress with this year, bringing in Tyron Smith, bringing in John Simpson, bringing in Morgan Moses, getting ABT back into the fold after injury. And, of course, Joe Tippmann. Last year played 14 games, 10 at center, 4 at guard. Was one of the only, you can make the case, the only bright spot. The other was probably ABT before he got hurt. Those were literally the only 2 bright spots on that offensive line all year. The only 2. And ABT, of course, didn't last very long, unfortunately. Tippmann played 14 games. Those were the only 2 things. Other than that, Dwayne Brown was a disaster. Becton was a disaster. I mean, how many guys even played? I mean, you had Schweitzer went down. McGovern went down. All these injuries, 13 different combinations. The numbers tell you like they were most pressures in the AFC. Just a disaster. We know what the Jets' offensive line was last year. One of the only bright spots was Tippmann, the 2nd-round pick, 43rd overall out of Wisconsin. One of the better offensive linemen in the draft last season. It was 2023 last draft. It was him and John Michael Schmitz, and he was a lot better last year than John Michael Schmitz. John Michael Schmitz, who, of course, is with the Crosstown Giants now, had some struggles. Tippmann, of course, had some of the rookie growing pains, but showed a lot of good things. You look at the numbers overall, and you saw a lot of really good growth in the final 3 games of the season. He finished top 5 among centers in overall and run blocking grade, according to PFF, in the final 3 games of the season. So finished on a high note. On top of that, he allowed 3 sacks, 2 quarterback hits, and a 97.9 pass block efficiency rating in his total 14 games played last year. He allowed just 3 sacks and 2 quarterback hits in 14 games. Those are very, very solid, good numbers for a rookie who didn't even start in week 1. You know? And I think that's something that is really, really impressive. This was a guy that kind of came onto the scene. Of course, McGovern goes down, had to take over at the center spot, played some guard, was a little bit all over the place. But for a guy that was supposed to kind of just sit last year and watch, he got thrown into things, played 14 games, and put up very, very productive numbers and was one of the lone bright spots. And he had a revolving door of guys around him. Right? He had AVT next to him, he goes down. But now you can really trust that he's even going to be a lot better because he's confident. He's got to be a lot more confident in the pieces next to him. You've got AVT at right guard. You added John Simpson, who was slotted next to him at left guard. So a lot of really good pieces, of course, the New York Jets added. Tittman's one of those blue chip cornerstone pieces. He's going to break out. I think Tittman's going to have a huge year. I think he's going to be one of the just best. Lincoln Tomlinson, another one. There it is. Lincoln Tomlinson. Playing alongside Lincoln Tomlinson. I mean, how bad must that be? He was awful. Now he gets AVT and Simpson alongside him. He also gets Rodgers, who quarterback and center kind of have that relationship with each other, and it seems like they've connected pretty well so far. So Tittman a breakout. I think he'll probably be out of all 3 of these guys that I talked, Gibson and Ruckert and Tittman, I think Tittman will probably walk away from this year with Tittman being the best out of these 3 guys. And he already is. I mean, Tittman was great last year. For a rookie, very solid, only getting better. Has a better quarterback now. I mean, you know, ideally as a Jet fan, right? Nick Mangold had the flow. He had the hair. He had it all. Great, all-time great center. My all-time favorite Jet was Nick Mangold. Ideally, Joe Tittman's your kind of next version of Nick Mangold. You know, and really, ideally, you kind of look at this offensive line and you say it's arguably the best offensive line since the 2015 team was good. But even you go back to those 09, 010 teams, or 09, 10 team, with Mangold and with the Brickshaw Ferguson and Alan Faneca and those guys like that, with pieces all over the place. This group's got that. So Tittman breakout candidate number 3. So Gibson, good chance he starts, has a quarterback, lots of skill, can return kicks. I like his chances. I like Gibson. I'm excited. And in Ruckert, kind of his put up or shut up. I'm still kind of iffy on what he's actually going to be able to do this year. But with more playing time, we've seen some flashes. The time is now. And really, to be honest with you, camp is going to be very important for Ruckert. If Ruckert has a rough camp, I wouldn't be surprised if he drops. And Yeboah is number 2, because Yeboah had a really good OTA mandatory minicamp. So we'll see. And then Tittman's already shown you a lot. I think he'll show you even more this season. All right, so now I want to move on here to some news and some other stuff here from today. So Ian Rappaport this morning was reporting on Justin Simmons. And look, we'll see what the New York Jets do. I mean, this roster is pretty complete. I don't think the Jets do anything major coming up. I mean, you could maybe look and say, maybe another. I don't think they'll add another running back. I mean, I think Tariq Cohen's kind of their version of a veteran. They've got Izzy there competing. They've got Braylon Allen. Number 2 is A. Davis. You know, I don't think they're going to bring in a veteran running back. Not that there's really any options out there. Maybe they bring in McGovern, which I would really like. Maybe they do that. I could definitely see that as a depth interior piece. Can play guard, can play center, really good in the locker room. I don't see them going after another receiver. I don't know what's happening with Corey Davis. I don't think that really happens. Realistically, the only move I could see the Jets probably making is McGovern, and outside of the possibility of Justin Simmons, because offensively you're pretty complete. The Jets kind of trust it, even though you look at the receiving core and you say, yeah, they could benefit from another piece there. I don't think the Jets will do it. We said the same thing last year. They didn't really do it. They're banking on Mike Williams coming back healthy. They're banking on Xavier Gibson taking a year or two leap. They're banking on Allen Lazard not being the worst receiver in football, which is it that hard to ask that he could be a little bit better than Rodgers? Maybe. I don't know. They're banking on Malachi Corley probably getting better as the year goes on. So that's kind of what they're relying on there. Maybe you get McGovern as your other piece. Other than that, defensively, you're pretty loaded. But the one position is safety. And that's because probably the most talented player left is Justin Simmons. When it comes to a free agency perspective, every guy left at every position on offense, on defense, Justin Simmons is probably the best available. And for the New York Jets, you look at the safety room. While I don't call it a weakness, because I don't think it's bad, I think a weakness is something that's bad. I would say it's certainly not a strength. I think the Jets could get away with this safety room, but a safety room of Chuck Clark, Tony Adams, Ashton Davis, you have Jalen Key competing there, Jarek Bernard-Converse. That room could use a Quandre Diggs, could use a Justin Simmons. No matter how much you like Tony Adams and Chuck Clark and love Ashton Davis's ball hawking ability and believe Chuck Clark will come back strong from an injury and believe that Tony Adams can take a year 3 jump after showing a lot of good things last year, you can't deny Justin Simmons would be a massive, massive improvement. And here was an update on Justin Simmons from Ian Rappaport this morning. And then we'll break down some more notes, what he could bring to the table and if this actually could happen.
Yeah, most of the teams I talk to consider him to be the top free agent still available. Just 30 years old, former Pro Bowler, former All-Pro. I mean, this is a guy who, in his prime, which he's still in, by the way, one of the best in the NFL, regardless of positions. He is healthy. There has been considerable interest, but this is one of those things where it's really just the situation and the money have to be right. We've seen plenty of high-profile, highly productive signings, either right before training camp or even as you get into training camp, as teams take a look at what they have on the roster and they say, you know what, this superstar that I didn't think now I need him. So the time is coming for Justin Simmons, and certainly teams have been sniffing around for some time, Steve.
Clearly one of the best, obviously been one of the best safeties in the NFL. You saw for the YouTube audience, the bottom of the screen, the statistic, 23 interceptions over the last 5 seasons, tied for the most since 2019. Has been one of the best coverage safeties in the league, especially over the last 5 seasons. Entering his 9th year in the league, you look at what he did last year, 70 total tackles, 8 passes defended, 3 interceptions in 15 games played. His career numbers are impressive, dating back to his rookie year in 2016. He was selected in the 3rd round out of Boston College, playing for the Broncos. He spent all 8 years with Denver. So this will be his first year away from there. 603 total tackles, 30 interceptions, 64 passes defended in 118 career games played. He's a 4-time second-team All-Pro, 2-time Pro Bowler, was the NFL interceptions co-leader in 2022 when he had 6 interceptions. And I think it's crazy. He had 6 interceptions in 12 games that year. Half the games he played in, he had an interception, which is just crazy. If he played 17 games that season, because he missed 5 games, if he played every game that year, he probably could have had 10 interceptions easily. If he had 6 in 12 games, he probably could have found a way to muster up 3 or 4 more if he played 5 games. So if he played 5 more games, played the full season. So that was an impressive year. Last year, also impressive. Missed 2 games, had 3 picks. Could have probably had 4, maybe 5 if he plays the whole season. But still had productive numbers last year. And overall, has been pretty healthy throughout its career. Like, overall, has been reliable from a injury perspective, from a games played perspective. You know, if you bring him in and he plays 15 games this year, I think you're fine with that. I know he only played 12 in 2022, but before that, he played all 17 in 2021, played all 16 in 2020, 2019, 2018. So relatively has been reliable on the field in 118 career games played over 8 seasons. But I've said this for a while now. You know, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this because I just don't think this will happen. I don't. I would love for it to happen. I've been very open about that. I think I like Tony Adams. I like Chuck Clark. I like Ashton Davis. I think it's solid. Look, it's an upgrade from where the Jets were a couple years ago. You know, LaMarcus Joyner was playing 2 years ago, right? He was a disaster. So they've gotten a lot better from where they were. I think this is even probably an upgrade over Jordan Whitehead, who was pretty disappointing in his time here, other than the 3-interception night he had in week 1 against the Bills, which was his career Jet highlight. But he had a lot of disappointing moments, from a missed tackles to some coverage issues. I think Whitehead was pretty disappointing. So you kind of got those two guys in their rear view, Joyner, Whitehead, who made some critical mistakes when they were back there. Chuck Clark is a Swiss Army knife, can do a little bit of everything. A veteran, a guy that had a lot of success in Baltimore, was one of really the underrated players in the league, but was one of the more underrated defensive players. Just good, solid piece, can play everywhere, played every single game, which was brutal because he played every single game with the Ravens pretty much. He had some crazy, like 1,000 something snaps he played in a row, comes to the Jets, hurts himself on the final plays of OTAs. That was just such like a same old Jets type moment. So you get him back, but the Jets, you can't deny it. They would 100% benefit from a Justin Simmons or even a Quandre Diggs. Obviously, Simmons is number 1. Diggs would be 2. But we'll see. I think the Jets are going to play. I think the Jets, honestly, I think they have it made up in their mind that this is their safety room because they've never sold high. You even go back to Robert Saleh's days in San Francisco. They never sold high on the safety room because what the Jets rely on is the defensive line getting to the quarterback, linebackers obviously doing their thing. They have elite corners. They have an elite shutdown corner. They have a lot of things in front of their safeties that are able to stop opposing teams, are able to shut some of the elite talent in football down, where they don't have to rely on their safeties as much. They have a defensive line that if you pin your ears back can get home. They have an elite number 1 corner in Sauce Gardner, the best in football. They have one of the best slots in football. They don't need to put much stress on this safety room. And I think that's always been the way Robert Saleh has run his defense. The safeties don't need to do a ton in this defense. They just don't. Just because of what's in front of them and the pieces in front of them and the production in front of them. That's why I don't think this will happen. Now, could the Jets maybe be playing this as, let's see what happens in camp? Maybe if Chuck Clark is doesn't look as good as they thought in camp, do you then go out and sign a Justin Simmons or a Quandre Diggs? If maybe Tony Adams or Ashton Davis don't look great, because I think the Jets, you're relying a lot on Tony Adams this year to take a pretty sizable year 3 jump, which I like Tony Adams. So we'll see. I think you have to kind of play this by ear, though, from a perspective of let's see what it looks like in camp. Maybe the Jets get a little desperate if the safety room looks poor in camp and they go out and see Justin Simmons is out there. Remember, the whole conversation about this team is win now, win now. We just talked about Devontae Adams. This would be a win now move to bring in Justin Simmons. You might like the pieces in here, but you can't deny Justin Simmons would come into this team and be the best safety on the roster day 1. He won't even step foot in the facility. The minute the trade goes down, he's already the best player in this safety room. That's the way I view it. And I think the Jets should make a move. I don't think they will, but they should. And I won't be disappointed if they don't. I won't be. Because I don't think this is do or die. Like, if they don't get Justin Simmons, the Jets are going to win 6 games this year. No. So CBS ranked their top 32 NFL coaches. And Robert Saleh, of course, made that list. Not very high. Pretty low, actually, on the list. And wanted to discuss it and pretty much go along the same premise of this is all Aaron Rodgers, and if Aaron Rodgers flames out, then the New York Jets are going to flame out. And that's just the way it is. And I also want to go to a Mike Williams clip that was released a couple days ago about the offense and who's really calling the plays and how this all kind of ties together with this coaching staff doesn't mean a whole lot. It's ultimately coming down to Aaron Rodgers. So Robert Saleh, the CBS Sports list came out, and they ranked Robert Saleh at number 29. Now, I will say this. His ranking, it's ugly. But it gets uglier when you find out who's around him. The only coaches behind Robert Saleh are Dennis Allen of the Saints, who is terrible. I'm surprised he still has a job there. Gerard Mayo, the Patriots, who has yet to coach a game, and then Brian Callahan of the Titans, who took over from Mike Vrabel, also has yet to coach a game. So the only three coaches that Robert Saleh is ahead of, and I'm not saying I disagree. Look, Robert Saleh's 18-33. He has 0 winning seasons. He has yet to make the playoffs. He's had back-to-back 7-win campaigns. He won 4 games his first year. It's been a disaster. Don't get me wrong. He's got a lot of things. He's got a lot of problems. The accountability's not always there. Not great with the media. Confusing. He just does confusing thing. We know what Saleh is. He hasn't won 18-33. That tells you all you need to know. But, man, that is bad company. The only coaches behind you are 2 guys that have yet to coach an NFL game, as a head coach, I should say, in Gerard Mayo and Brian Callahan, and in Dennis Allen, who is, how does he even have a job still? And in front of Saleh is Antonio Pierce, who has 9 games coached, and they already are putting him over Robert Saleh. Technically his first year. And Jonathan Gannon of the Cardinals, who went 4-13 last year. Matt Eberflus of the Bears, who's been a disaster. So I guess you can maybe make a case that Saleh's, I don't know if Saleh's as bad as Eberflus. Eberflus is 10-24 in 3 seasons. Saleh's 18-33 in 4 seasons. So, 3 seasons as well. Eberflus, I apologize. Eberflus is 10-24 in 2 seasons. We'll see where he's at after this year. But either way, Saleh's not in good company. He's behind Eberflus. He's behind Jonathan Gannon, behind Antonio Pierce, who has coached 9 games in the NFL. He's only ahead of Dennis Allen, who stinks, and 2 new coaches. He's also behind, they put Mike McDonald of the Seahawks, 25, who's brand new head coach, of course, was the Ravens DC, taking over for Pete Carroll in Seattle. So not a good look for Saleh. And I can't say I disagree. Here was what CBS Sports had to say on Saleh. Is Saleh well liked in the building? Is he still a master of defensive orchestration? The answer is probably yes on both accounts. He and general manager Joe Douglas, however, have overseen more of a reality show than a reliable football operation in New York, most infamously hitching multiple playoff caliber teams to Zach Wilson. Aaron Rodgers was probably right that everyone's jobs depends on his glory, on his return to glory. He's 100% right. Everything hinges on Aaron Rodgers. And this is another example of that. We know what Saleh is. 18-33, we talked about it. 0 winning seasons, yet to make the playoffs. The in-game adjustments aren't great. How many times have we seen after bye weeks this team flunk out? Last year, they were 4-3. They were 3-3 going into the bye. Come out of the bye, got to 4-3, and then blew up. Lost to the Chargers, lost to the Raiders, bad losses to the Falcons, blown out by the Bills, all that, all these disastrous games they had down the stretch last season, blown out by Miami, didn't even show up in that game. No quarterback play is something to take into account, right? He has his hands on a top 5 defense. You give him credit for that, but he still only has 18 wins in 3 years, and that's not good enough. He has had no quarterback play, so it's tough. Now, look, we've seen how many times has the offense struggled. Saleh doesn't even go over to them on the sideline, has shown a lack of accountability. It's been a disaster, but he gets one more year. Saleh, there's no more excuses. No more, right? It's a must-win season. He goes into this year, entering year number 4 with a losing record by a wide margin. He has Aaron Rodgers now as his quarterback. He's more involved in the offense, which should have been there since day one. I don't know why he waited all this time. Saleh should have, we hired him to be a CEO type coach, and he hasn't been that. Maybe he finally realized that this year in year number 4. But he's more involved in the offense. He has Aaron Rodgers, a plethora of talent on offense, and he still has his hands on the top 5 defense. This is it. If you win 7 games this year, it's over. You're done. This thing's over. You're out of here. Him and Douglas are gone. Who knows what happens with Rodgers? I don't even want to go down that road because hopefully they're not winning 7 games. Hopefully they're winning 11, 12, maybe more. Hey, heck, 17-0. Now we're getting delusional, but you get the point. It's up to Rodgers. It's all Rodgers. This team could still make the playoffs with the 29th ranked head coach in football, according to CBS, and one of the worst offensive coordinators. Because Rodgers is in control. That's what he wants. And guess what? That's what he's getting. And we saw he had success in Green Bay with it. All those years with Nathaniel Hackett, OC's just a label put on him. He's not really the offensive coordinator. And Robert Saleh, while he is the head coach, if the New York Jets win it all this year, it's not going to be because of Robert Saleh. It's going to be because of Aaron Rodgers, his leadership, the offense taking a step to a level that we haven't seen forever, since really 2015, and even that team wasn't good enough to get to the postseason. And a defense that's going to remain top 5, top 3, maybe the best in football. My biggest question with Saleh, because we have seen him sometimes struggle in these late game situations. His late game situations, especially in the playoffs, because he has no playoff experience, but how he would coach against an Andy Reid. Can he out-coach an Andy Reid, a Zach Taylor, a John Harbaugh, even a D'Amico Ryans in a big playoff game, right? The AFC title game, 3 minutes left. Can he manage the clock? Can he do the right things? Can he press the right button on the road in the AFC title game at Arrowhead? Or is Andy Reid going to out-coach him? Can he draw up the right schemes to shut down Mahomes and give Rodgers one more shot? Or is he going to get out-coached late in the game, right? That is the biggest concern I have with Saleh. And some of that is in Rodgers' control because you hope late in the game the ball's in his hand and it's up to him. But some of it is in Saleh's control from a clock management perspective and even a schematic defensive perspective, where if the Jets need to get a stop, can you rely on Ulbrich and Saleh to get the job done late in a game, clock management, all that stuff in a road playoff game against one of these elite head coaches and a John Harbaugh and an Andy Reid, one of those guys, even a Zach Taylor, even a Kevin Stefanski, who has proven himself in Cleveland, a D'Amico Ryans, who had a great year, number 1. I don't know if Pittsburgh will get there, but even a Mike Tomlin. Like, can you trust Saleh against one of those guys? That's still a question. Some of that is out of Rodgers' control, but most of this, it's all Rodgers. It's all Rodgers. And there was one clip I want to show, one more clip, then we'll close this thing out, on Mike Williams discussing Rodgers, the offense, the play calling, and basically telling everybody Rodgers gets the play from Hackett, doesn't really listen to it. But no, he didn't say that. Rodgers gets the play from Hackett, and what he sees at the line, he's going to change it. Here it is.
Obviously, you haven't gotten the time to catch passes from Aaron Rodgers yet, but how excited are you to kind of form that relationship even further once you get back on the field?
I'm excited. Just seeing the way that he throws the ball and put these guys in the right position. It don't matter the plays that being called. He's switching it at the line and seeing what the defense is in and putting everybody in the right position to, be successful. So I like that he do that.
Hear that? Doesn't matter what the play is called. He is changing at the line. 100%. He's the play caller. He's the guy. He's the coach, the player, the quarterback. He's pretty much everything, hinging on Aaron Rodgers. And that's okay. He's a 4-time NFL MVP. I think 10-time Pro Bowler. I don't even know how many All-Pros he's been selected to. A lot. Super Bowl champion, future Hall of Famer. Relies on him. It hinges on him. So, Saleh being ranked 29th doesn't mean a whole lot. But it does prove to you, and what Mike Williams is saying, how much this is all Rodgers. It's just another reminder. This is all Rodgers. And that's okay. They put their eggs in the Aaron Rodgers basket the minute they traded for him back in April of last year. All right, so that'll do it for another episode of In the Trenches with Gang Green. A little bit of a longer episode today. Kind of wanted to discuss some of those things, breakout candidates, some of the Justin Simmons stuff, and, of course, Robert Saleh being ranked low on that CBS Sports list. By the way, Andy Reid, for those of you who were wondering, came out number 1 on the list. The top 10 featured 6 AFC coaches and then 4 NFC. So tells you, though, a lot of good talent from a coaching perspective in the AFC. Now, before we close things out, once again, I want to tell you about our friends over at Huga House. Click the link in the description down below. That'll take you to the Huga House store. You could shop from a wide range of vintage-inspired hats. 10 brand new hats have been released. They're going fast, though. So get your hands on one of those 10 brand new hats that have just been released, or get your hands on some of the hats that Aaron Rodgers wears, Shane Gillis, even Shohei Ohtani, Tyler Conklin, JT Realmuto. Heck, even a division rival, Josh Allen, who none of us really like, but he rocks it as well. And so do I. I got my Jet hat on today, but you've seen me many times rock the Huga House hat here on the program. So get your Huga House hat, and at checkout, use promo code BUBS for 15% off your purchase. Get yourself some swag. So that'll do it. We'll be back here in the coming days for my breakout candidates on defense for the 2024 New York Jets. And next week, that's it. One more dead week. Training camp begins. Let's win some football games this year. A lot more content coming your way. We'll have our player preview series up here in a couple weeks starting July 22nd. So 1 week from this Monday, we'll have our player preview series hot off the press, getting started here. So looking forward to that and a lot more content coming your way. So as always, JETS, 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 Jets.